So today I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the USASA election that's coming up. This information session will give you some background as to what's involved in the role, what's involved in USASA, what USASA does, and how USASA's structure kind of creates having the need for a board election and these kinds of things. So you can only hear my voice, you can't see me, but I'm Bridget. I'm the Manager of Governance and Student Representation at USASA. So I've worked with USASA for if you don't count the period where I left for a little bit, for like 7 years almost. So this will be the 8th board that I will have worked with. So no stranger to this election process. And hopefully you'll learn a little bit about what we're trying to do here and what you'll get out of this role. So, oops. This is what we're going to cover today. So, summarizing a little bit of background about USASA, the role of the board and the responsibilities of board reps, what you guys will do, how the election process works, and then talk a bit about why it's worth it. When I ran this session earlier today, we finished at about 5 or 10 minutes too, so we'll still have plenty of time for questions at the end. If you did have any questions that you wanted to ask throughout, please don't be shy. Just unmute yourself and ask the question or put it in the chat. Just a reminder as well that this session is recorded, so other people might see it, and that's up to you to use your discretion whether you want to ask the question or not. But that said, if you're asking a question, the answer that I give might be really helpful to other people watching as well. So yeah, just putting that out there. So USASA is the University of South Australia Student Association. The mission of the organisation is to empower students to shape their own university journey. And what that really means is that USASA is here to provide services to UniSA students, to support them, to make them feel empowered, to ensure that students are having services designed by students. So that's the role of the board, and that you've got what you need to have a really great university experience while you're here at UniSA. So you'll see that our vision is for UniSA students that are empowered and have the capacity and skills for living and leading. So what that really means is if we fulfill our mission, that's the vision. That's what we'll see. We'll see students that have that characteristics. So that's kind of everything at the heart of what USASA does. Is this about empowering students and by students for students. So hopefully you'll see that as we talk a bit more about what USASA does. So essentially USASA is structured as a incorporated association, which is basically a fee-for-service organisation providing services for UniSA students, both on behalf of the university, if you think about the way we're funded, but also just on behalf of USASA and behalf of the board. By the members. So it's kind of important to talk about USASA's structure here so you have a bit of context for why the board and the elections run the way that they do. So an incorporated association, what we're actually electing here is we're electing the committee of management for that association. So you might hear us talk about board members or representatives and use that term interchangeably, but just to add a bit more complexity, what we're actually talking about is the committee of management for an incorporated association. So that also probably makes sense to you now when you see how there's quite strict criteria for who can be a board member. You have to be USASA student, that you have all these other criteria that you have to meet around, your eligibility criteria there. But it's also the voting side of it as well. So only students can vote because our students are members. So all UniSA students are members of USASA. Which is the first hurdle to come across here in nominating for the board is you've got to be a UniSA student, and that's why the students can vote for the board and so on. These services that USASA runs, they are all these services have kind of come about from overarching board kind of direction and strategic direction of previous boards. The actual doing of these services though is a little bit different. So I'll start off, from the top here, you can see advocacy, volunteering, student voice, Burst, the student magazine, USASA clubs, USASA board, social events, and merch. These are all services that USASA provides for UniSA students, but it's not necessarily the board themselves who are carrying out these services. And that's like an important distinction to make because you can see here, this is how USASA actually operates. So if you can see my cursor, hopefully you can, I'm circling around where it says student board. If we start there, the board directs well, it's actually general manager, but this is an old graphic that I couldn't update. The board updates the general manager, who then directs the staff, who then provide those services. That's kind of the way it works. Then you can see here there's another arrow that has the support, which is pointing back to the board from the staff. That's basically me and my role, but also any other USASA staff, including the general manager. It's just kind of a bit simpler to show it like this, where we kind of recognize that your university students, this might be the first time that you've done something like this, that you've been involved in an association, and we really want to set you up to succeed. So that's why we have some paid staff whose job it is specifically to train the board, to help support the board in carrying out their work. And you also, as part of that support process, is you've got a legal advisor and a finance advisor. So they also sit on the board, and support the board and what they do. The actual decision making on the board, though, is only made by the students. So before I talked a little bit about how, we want it to be by students for students, and that's kind of put in with how only board members who are students actually have voting rights on the board. So you get supported and you get advice from your non-voting board members, which is the general manager and the advisors, and then from the USASA staff who are there to support you. But really, it's the board, who are making the decisions. Those 15 elected student representatives. So there are 15 representatives there. You can see down on that column on the left, you've got the president, postgraduate student rep, and so on. You can read the rest. It's just a little bit important as well to notice of where these can come from for the process of nominating. So any student from any campus is able to nominate for president. Only postgraduate students are able to nominate for postgraduate student rep. Only Aboriginal students are able to go for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student rep, and of course Torres Strait Islander, but I've just used the phrase. And then international students can only go for international student rep. These campus-based positions, so if you've got a home campus of City West, then you can go for City West, and so on. I just also want to point out that with the UniSA online rep, that's specifically for students who are enrolled through UniSA online. So it's not, that position isn't for students who might be studying external. So, like an ordinary enrollment, but you're just doing all your classes enrolled in externally. It's specifically for people who are enrolled through UniSA online. You will know if you're enrolled through UniSA online because you've got a completely different kind of learn online thing. You've got your own terms. If you're not sure whether you're UniSA online or not, you're probably not, because you would definitely know if you were. But just wanting to make that distinction, because that is kind of deemed as a campus of the university. So you are only able to go for that one if you are enrolled that way. So they're the 15 different positions on the board. So most of the positions have pretty similar responsibilities, but I'll just point out a little bit about the difference with the role of the president, because the role of the president is quite, there's a lot more going on with the responsibility and role for the president than the other board members. So I mentioned a second ago that any student from any campus can nominate for president. I will just flag, though, that it will probably be quite difficult if you're not based in Adelaide, it might be quite difficult for you to be president, because there are a lot of, it will be difficult for you to carry out a lot of the meetings and the responsibilities and the stuff that you have to do, just by virtue of a lot of it being based in person. USASA is quite good with doing things remotely. But with the role of the president, it's quite integrated with other areas of the university, so it's not always the easiest to do remotely. If that is something that you're thinking of, just factor that in. It doesn't mean you're ineligible to run. It just means that if you are successful, you might find it more difficult to do the role. So just think about that when you're working out whether to nominate or not. But yeah, so the president basically, you're the main person for the organization. You chair the meetings for the board. You chair any executive committees that get brought up. Whether or not there are executive committees is up to the board. each year. But you're also the media contact for USASA. You also oversee the conduct and performance of board members. So you're really the leader both of the organisation but of the board as well. And you also have other responsibilities on the University Council, which is UniSA's like top committee. The academic board, which is like the top academic committee of the university, and also the student appeals committee, which is another one of those governance responsibilities that the university asks the president to do. So there is a little bit more involved in that one. But yeah, we'll come back to that. Other board members, basically the main thing that you're doing, you're going to be consulting with other students, trying to understand what they want. You might chair a committee or participate in the USASA committees. I'll come back to that one in a sec. You might work on projects. You will write monthly activity reports every month of what you're up to. And you'll attend other meetings of USASA or university as required. I think this first one here is going to be really important next year. So as you guys know, UniSA is merging with the University of Adelaide. And so one of the main focuses next year for the board is very likely going to be consulting students about things relating to the merger, relating to the new student association and things like that. There will be a lot of that consultation side on the agenda. That said, there's also then going to be ordinary business. It's not all just going to be merger. It's going to be stuff around the university or around how USASA is just doing year on year and what your ordinary core business is of USASA. And often the way that a lot of that stuff gets done is through the committee structure. So USASA board establishes some subcommittees to help carry out the broader work that needs to be done and how you'll manage the organization. And in brackets here, you'll see that I've put finance, clubs and governance, etc. So I haven't actually listed all the committees. I mean, this year the board established 5 committees. They established finance, clubs, diversity, equity and access, education committee and governance committee. The reason that I haven't kind of listed all of them is because technically the board decides each year which committees it's going to run. So it's incredibly unlikely that the board would not establish a finance committee or a governance committee. Like they're so important as to getting your work done. It's also, I think the board next year will probably establish the same committees that it has this year, if not more, just because that work needs to get done. But I'm not in a position to tell you exactly what committees will be next year. But here, what's important though is that board members can chair and participate in these committees. So by chairing them, you're the person who sets the agenda. You're the person who organizes the meetings. You run the meetings when they happen. It's a really great way to get a kind of more in-depth information about a subject area, or to, if you've got a special interest in that subject area, to gain those skills in that. So for example, our finance committee this year, the finance committee is chaired by someone who is studying finance and has an interest in that area. So they've found it really useful from that perspective of being able to, have practice talking about financial reports and have practice talking about those things and speaking about them in meetings. But also we've had people who've chaired finance committee who have had no finance background whatsoever, and they used it as a learning opportunity. So just to learn as much as they could about that area and really develop their skills. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of opportunities for you to develop information in areas that you want, and to gain that leadership experience. Same with projects. The projects will vary year on year and on what is of interest to both board members and what's on the agenda in the committees. And I guess some examples of projects. These often do come through the committees themselves. So for example, the Diversity, Equity and Access Committee, that's a committee that, I guess it's in the name, you can hear what it's about, but putting free menstrual products in bathrooms and making those kinds of things available. And other projects that have been worked on through the committees have been things like course evaluation, like those student evaluation of teaching. So that's something that the education committee is working on at the moment. So there are these special areas that you can really drill down into and have that kind of student representation, make sure that students are having their voice heard and working with the university on things. And you're often raising issues for students through this process as well. Every month you'll write a monthly activity report. And this is because, if you're the committee of management for an organization like USASA, you're going to want to make sure your members know what you've been up to. So every month you'll just write some activity reports. If you want to check out some examples of this, you can always go to the USASA website and you can click on the student board page, and each board member has their activity reports uploaded there. So not only will that give you an example of what your current board have been up to, but you'll see the kind of things that they do month on month as well. You will also then be required to attend meetings of USASA or the university, depending on what they are. So on that last slide, when I was talking about the president, I mentioned academic board. That also can be, other board members can attend that as well. So I guess, really what I'm getting down to here is that this is primarily a decision-making decision-making role. So you're on the committee of management of an incorporated association. You make high-level decisions about the strategic direction of the organization. For example, what services are we going to run? What are we going to put in the budget to those services each year? That kind of thing. And so there's a lot of internal decision making. So here on the left, you can see this column that says internal. What I'm talking about here is USASA. So what is the decision-making responsibilities within USASA as an organization? So you've got your board meetings, which you have every month. You've got your committee meetings, which you also happen every month usually, depending on the committee. In this little subheading there, I've put funding proposal and clubs awards because it's kind of an example of a couple of those big picture decisions that get made through that committee process. You've got your strategic planning, you've got your event committees. So these are usually if the USASA event staff are wanting some student input into an event that they're running, or they want just some more broader feedback on coordinating some of that, they might establish a committee, and often we'll have board members be a part of that as well, to both provide the student voice and to give that expertise of their cohort or campus that they're from. There can also be hiring panels that you might be part of, and that includes like hiring staff really within USASA. Over here on the right, I've got a list of external, and really what I mean by external is UniSA. So at the top here, we've got formal inquiries and academic review appeals. So what these two are, these are examples of committees that are established by the university through academic policy. And so sometimes the university will have a policy that says, okay, if this particular situation happens, then a committee will happen to make a decision about it. And one of the people on that committee will be someone from the USASA board. And so when those kinds of things happen, that is around formal inquiries or academic review, board members will sit on those and they'll participate their time in that. Student Appeals Committee is another one. That one's kind of just reserved for the president because in the policy it explicitly says the president. And University Council is the president and the postgraduate student rep. The academic board, there's 5 student reps that go onto academic board from USASA board, and they get chosen in the beginning of the year when you guys start your terms. Other decision-making things that you might be involved with at the uni is working groups. Now, this one's probably going to be pretty important next year when we're looking at more things around setting up the new association. There are going to be more opportunities to do that. There then also might be hiring panels for the university as well. So, like for example, the university was hiring a new manager of international student advisors this year, and they had the international student rep come and sit on that hiring panel. So things like that. There's a pretty broad range of things that you can get involved with by being on the board. So this is kind of what individual board members do and spend their time doing. I'll drill down into this a little bit later on and talk about the actual time and what this looks like time-wise, because I know right now it sounds like a lot, but it actually isn't a lot. You've got a lot of people with you, so we'll get to that in a sec. But I guess I want to make the distinction between what the board members do and the individual responsibilities of board members, and then with what the board does as a collective. So as a collective, as the management, the committee of management for an incorporated association, you have the responsibility to act in the best interest of the organisation and the members. So you need to make sure that USASA is doing the right thing, that all the staff and everything that we do is compliant with our constitution and with any regulations that you've established. Ensuring that good governance is being upheld. And governance is more than just like policies and rules. Governance also includes things about like financial management and risk assessment and those kinds of things. That's actually really fundamental to what the board does as a collective group. Making sure that the organization maintains its sense of purpose and direction. Now, that kind of comes back to that first slide where I talked about USASA's mission and vision. So I said everything that we do comes, has empowering students at its core and at its heart. This is, one of the main things that the board will do. If they'll look over and hear reports from the general manager and from staff, and they'll go, oh yes, this is in line with what we're doing and what we've said we want our strategic direction to be. So yeah, basically anything that you're doing with USASA, you'll be asking yourself, is this decision in the best interest of USASA and does it further USASA's objectives? Right. Now, before I go into a bit of more information around the expectations about timing and stuff like that, does anyone have any questions about the governance context, or I suppose the way USASA is structured and why we have the elections and stuff? Nope. All right, cool. I'll just get going through. So when you look at all those things that I talked around before, it seems like a lot, but really we recommend that you'll probably spend, if you're doing a fair share and engaged in, if you're an engaged board member, you'll probably be spending around 5 hours a week or 10 hours a fortnight on your USASA responsibilities and things associated with that. I say 5 hours a week and 10 hours a fortnight because it's not going to look the same every week, and it's not going to look the same for every board member. Because, I mentioned before the postgraduate rep, they're on university council. Like that might mean that they're doing a bit more of their council stuff in that week, and then they might have a they might have a really busy week and then a not very busy week. Every board member will go to a board meeting every month. You guys know when they're on. We send you guys establish when when the board meeting is going to be each month, and then you have a schedule and you stick to that schedule for the rest of the year. So you've got heaps of notice around when the board meetings will be. If you put your hand up to be on any committees, that will also might be a time commitment that you have. If you're working on any projects, that might also be some time that you have. And working on a project might include things like sending emails to people at the university, or it might be going out and surveying students and talking to them about what they want. It could all look very different depending on what it is that you're doing. It could be formal inquiries. It could be being on any advisory groups or working groups. So it really is going to vary. No two board members are going to have exactly the same experience. You do have an opportunity to, really tailor the extra stuff into what you're interested in doing and where you're interested in developing your skills. Other than the bare minimum of going to board meetings and then the training and stuff, which is on the second part of the slide, which I'll get to in a second. Yeah, it really will be dependent on what you put your hand up for. And so on. At the bottom of that first one, I've also got catch-ups with the president and staff. So that might also be depending on how the president's management style is, but they might want to have check-ins with you. They might want to have meetings around things. That's up to them. And then with staff, so quite often I'll check in with board members, see how you're going with things, work on if there's anything that I can do to support you and that kind of thing. So time with that as well. Over here on the right-hand side, I've got compulsory training. Now, I just want to make it clear, we really want you guys to succeed. We really want board members to be in the best position possible to be able to deliver your roles and to deliver them well. So we do provide an extensive training at the beginning of the term. So the term of a board member, as you can see at the bottom, you start on the 1st of January and you go till the 31st of December the following year. So it's a one full calendar year. So the election that we're having now, which will be finished in October, that will be for next year's board starting then. So you've got quite a lot of lead time to know when you need to be doing things. We give you heaps of notice around when this board retreat is because we really want you to go. We really want you to go because it's compulsory, and if you don't go, then you may lose your position on the board. It's taken that seriously that it's put in the USASA Constitution, which is the main document that governs USASA as an organization. And it's quite serious, like it's quite important that you do go to that. You can see there the dates that we've already got set for it. What that actually looks like, the board retreat, is that you'll come to Adelaide and you'll go to Harndorf. There's a convention centre in Harndorf where we have this retreat, and you'll stay there for 2 days. There's a one night accommodation. So you arrive in the morning, then you have your training, first day of training, you stay overnight, and then there's a second day of training, and then you'll go home. But that's super important. And so that's on those 2 days there. We do also then have a symposium a few weeks later, and that's kind of really an extension of what you learn at the retreat, but it's in more of a relationships kind of thing. So basically, in summary, what you learn at the board retreat is the really high level kind of skills-based things around your role. So you learn about finance and reporting, you learn about strategy, you learn about governance, you learn about risk, you'll learn about all of the things you need to do to be an effective board member. And then at the symposium, that's when you can meet all the university staff and stakeholders that you might work with. It's where you'll meet some of the USASA staff that you'll work with. It's really more about relationships and then kind of how you'll be effective at doing those governance roles that you learnt about at the retreat. So we can't make the symposium compulsory, but again, we do really want you to come to that, and it is kind of treated just as important as the retreat. You'll see here as well for events. I've just put like orientation and campus fair. So USASA runs sections of orientation and campus fair each year in SP2 and SP5. And we really love it when board reps are involved in these processes for two main reasons. One, because we think it's really important that USASA shows students how, that there are students in charge of USASA and that the students are connected to what we're doing. But also we think it's really good for the board members to be able to go out there and represent USASA and to meet students and to meet the students that they represent. Because obviously there's quite a lot of distance in time from when the election happens and people vote you in to then when you actually start carrying out your roles the next year. So we also want to set you up for success by giving you as many opportunities as possible to go out and meet with students and to get to know the students that you are representing and that you are, managing the organization that they're members of. So the USASA board, I've touched a lot on about the governance side of things, but you also have a dual responsibility to be kind of student representatives for the campus as well. So it's more than just about governance and about the decision making. It's also about representing those student groups and helping them have a voice both at USASA and at the university. So having those events and being able to volunteer at those in various capacities is also really important too. So yeah, the time commitment, 5 hours a week made up of all of these different things. Obviously the board retreat, that's more than 5 hours a week, but there are peaks and troughs throughout the year where things are more busy or less busy than others. So that's kind of what your average week might look like, be part of those. I have highlighted that board meeting attendance, just so you can see how important it is. So I said just a second ago that you get your timetable and your agenda for this at the very beginning of the time that you're on the board. So the board sets when the board meetings will be for the rest of the year. Board meeting attendance is super important. So because the Constitution says that if you don't attend 2 in a row or 3 out of 5 without having leave approved by the board, you automatically lose your position. And that's not, no one really wants that. We want to have board members that are being able to attend, that are participating. So yeah, just be aware of that. The board meeting attendance is taken quite seriously. That said, obviously, when there are situations where you can't attend for good reason, you can apply for leave, and that's kind of why it says here without being excused by the board, because things do come up. But really, I just want to highlight this from the very beginning that if you are going to commit to doing this, you at a very minimum, very very minimum, need to commit to attending board meetings. Yeah. Again, as well, I've talked also about how, there are some compulsory things in person. We are not going to make you fund yourself to attend a compulsory thing that's based away from where you are. So if you're a regional or an online student, and you're not based in Adelaide, and it's you will need travel arrangements in order to get to those compulsory things, we will fund that. So we will make sure that you are able to come to the retreat. We'll fund you to come to the symposium. We'll, cover the accommodation, flights, and transfers from the airport for that. You do get a small honorarium as a board member, of $3,000 a year. So I think it's about $250 a month, which is quite, it's a nominal amount. It's just there to help you cover any kind of incidental costs that you might have incur as being part of a board member, or just kind of, as a thank you. It's definitely not meant to be a salary or wage or anything like that. Like, this is a voluntary role. You are a volunteer essentially. But, for things like this where you are going to incur personal expenses in order to attend, we do cover those for you. So yeah, traveling to the retreat and symposium is the main one there. There's not really any need these days to attend board meetings in person. All board meetings take place both in person at the City West campus and via Teams or Zoom, depending on how the president wants to run it. So there's a lot of online integration with what USASA does. I'm actually based in New Zealand, and I do this role. So there's a lot of ways to do things remotely. So it's quite very much at the forefront of what we do, wanting to make things accessible for people. So that has covered on what USASA is as an organisation, what board members do as individuals, what the board does as a collective group, and then kind of a snapshot into what the day-to-day of being a board member looks like, or the week-to-week, or the month-to-month rather, because it's no 2 days are the same. Before I move on to talking about the election process, does anyone have any questions about the board or being a rep? All right, cool. So, nominations will open next week. In order to be eligible to nominate for a position, you need to be an ordinary member of USASA as point number one. So that is a UniSA student with current enrollment or enrollment this year. You need to be an onshore student located in Australia. So if you're based in, say you're a UniSA online student and you're based in Melbourne, that's fine as long as you're actually living in Australia. This is one of the criteria in our constitution, and it's also one of the criteria for an incorporated association. So just making sure that you are physically located in Australia, or where your address is. You also can never have been involuntarily been removed or vacated from the board. So, I guess an example of that was if you were on the board previously and you missed 2 consecutive meetings and your position was vacated, that's kind of what that means there. You also cannot be a permanent or fixed term contract employee of USASA or UniSA. So key points to that one is permanent or fixed term. If you've casually employed by USASA, casually employed by UniSA, that's all right. If you do have some kind of employment arrangement with either USASA or UniSA and you're not quite sure, feel free to send me an email to query that. We've had, that pops up every now and then. So feel free to get in touch to query that before you nominate. It just might be good for you to have that peace of mind. You also can never have been convicted of an indictable offence or an offence related to fraud or dishonesty. So this is one of those other criteria that comes from the Incorporated Associations Act, which is the legislation that governs incorporated associations in South Australia, and also from our USASA Constitution. So an indictable offence, I'll let you look up the definition yourself, but it does basically mean any kind of offence that a penalty could involve incarceration. So I don't know, it's one of those complicated legal ones that you just want to be for sure. But if you have something on your criminal history that you think might make you ineligible, or you have something that goes beyond speeding fine or things like that, you're just not quite sure, have a look into that yourself in the first instance. But feel free to get in touch if you did want to ask any specific questions. They may be limited to what we can actually answer around that. It's kind of on you to work that out. That said, I mean, it's kind of on you to work that out before we have the election and afterwards. So when every successful board member will be required to submit a police check to USASA to make sure that you aren't ineligible on this basis. USASA does pay for the police checks of successful board members, so we do this afterwards. So we won't check it beforehand, like when you're a candidate, but once you've been elected, then we do go through this process. So if you are unsure or there might be something that pops up, do try and work it out beforehand because it might save you a bit of grief. Because it will come to light at some point anyway when we do that police check. That said, yeah, it's just something to be aware of. This last one on here is a little bit quirky. So to be eligible to nominate for the board, you agree to comply with directions from the commissioner in connection with any application for a liquor license in SA. Basically, because you're the committee of management for an incorporated association, if USASA were to apply for a liquor license, you would have to comply with that. It's a bit random. USASA used to run a bar. It no longer does run a bar. So it's, it's not really something that is relevant at all. It's just kind of in the Constitution. And because it's in the Constitution, I have to put it on the slide. So just be aware of that. Yeah. So in terms of the actual how the election process gets managed, we have a returning officer who is in charge of actually administering the election and making those decisions around it. So the returning officer that we have for this election is Deborah Arnold. She's external to USASA. She is we're just contracting her for this election. She has her own business called Third Sector Management. Deb has been involved with USASA elections for at least the last 7 years. So she's got a lot of knowledge around what we do and around how the election regulations, what's in them, how they should be interpreted and things like that. So she's got a lot of experience. Her job is to make sure that our election process is compliant with those regulations, that she is compliant with those regulations. She makes decisions about any issues that come up, and she may delegate aspects of this to the assistant returning officer. Now, the assistant returning officer is me. What that actually looks like in practice, though, of those, delegating aspects of this to me is basically I help with the marketing and do things like run these information sessions and, do all the administrative work behind running the election. Whereas then if there are any issues, Deb makes the, dealings around that. I will also point out that Deb actually, yes, I will help carry out the marketing and do the administration behind this, but Deborah actually approves everything that we put out. So while I do work with the current USASA board and past boards and will work with future boards, my role in this is basically administrative and to kind of get you, in touch with Deborah when you need to or to bring things to her attention, kind of be that first port of call for the students involved in this. But that said, if you want to go straight to Deb and you want to skip me, if you've got a question, absolutely go for it. You can see her email address there. When you do go to nominate, you will receive a receipt that you've nominated from me, but then you'll receive an actual acceptance of your nomination from Deborah as we go through. So that's how that is run. So the nominations open on Monday. The nomination form will be available on the USASA website. You can also read the election notice on the USASA website. Now, that is an official document that contains all of the eligibility criteria in more detail. It has more specific information about nominating and what will happen during voting. That said, it's kind of also a bit of a governance requirement that we create that. So we're not trying to hide anything in the election notice. We want to make everything as transparent as possible and easy for you guys to nominate and to understand how to nominate as possible. But there's a good summary in the election notice of what you'll need to do. When you're filling out your nomination form, make sure you carefully read all the instructions on there. So one thing that you'll need to do is to upload a photo or photocopy of your student ID. If you are a UniSA online student, we know you don't have student ID cards, so we'll just get you to upload a screenshot of your enrollment status, current enrollment. Basically, the reason that we need you to do that is because we just want to make sure that it's actually you who is nominating. Because you self-nominate for USASA board positions, you don't require a seconder or anything like that. We just want to make sure that the people who are that it is actually you who's doing it, and it's not just someone trying to play a trick on someone and nominating them for the board or something like that. It's never happened in the time that I've run USASA elections. I think this is the 13th election that I've been involved in, and I've never seen that happen. But, you know, we just want to make sure that you're protected against that. And then you will receive emails. All correspondence relating to the election will go through your student email address as well. So if you start receiving emails, if anyone starts receiving emails saying that they've nominated when they haven't, it'll get found out pretty quickly. We do also check the provisional eligibility of all candidates after nominations close. So when you put in your nomination, Actually, I'll go back one step. So when you nominate, you have the option to nominate for up to 2 positions. So you can only be elected to 1 position, but you can nominate for up to 2. So for example, if you wanted to run for president and city west rep, you might run for both. The order in which that the actual positions are elected to is predetermined in the regulations. And you can only be nominated for 1 position. So say you ran for president and city west rep and you got the top number of votes for both president and city west rep, you'll only actually be able to be on one of those board positions. Which in this case would be president, because that is the position that gets counted first. What would then happen is that then your preferences would get redistributed to the next people for the City West rep, which I will come back to in a sec when we talk about voting. But yeah, basically, you can nominate for multiple positions. There is also going to be a position on the ballot form called NUS delegate. Now, this is a position that is well, we run the election on behalf of the National Union of Students to get delegates for their national conference. So the National Union of Students has an annual conference every year in December, and they are allowed, I think it's 7 for UniSA. So 7 UniSA students are able to attend that conference, and the people who are allowed to go to that are elected from the members. So we run that election while we run the USASA one. I'll just make it really clear that that position does not count as up to 2. So if you were running for NUS delegate, you could run, 2 USASA board positions and then NUS delegate. It doesn't count as towards the 2. If you were curious around the NUS or wanted more information about that, I'm not actually an expert on that. I think it's probably best if you go to the NUS website or try and find out who our current NUS delegates are for UniSA and talk to them. We just run the election on behalf of them. I've got a link to the NUS on the election website, and I will have a link to the NUS website on the nomination form as well, so you can find out that information. But yeah, I just wanted to make that clear that that doesn't count towards one of the 2. All right, so now going back to where I said provisional eligibility. So once we receive all of the nominations, we then check that people are actually eligible for the positions that they've run based on the things, like based on their enrollment. So if you've nominated for Whyalla student rep, we then actually, before we, put you on the ballot form for that position, we check with Campus Central that you are actually from that campus. Same with like postgraduate student rep, international student rep, etc. Like we check all of those positions to make sure that those people who've nominated for them are supposed to be able to run for that position. We just call it provisional eligibility because obviously I talked a bit before about police checks, and we won't know someone's full eligibility until that process is complete, and that won't happen until after. So yeah, we just do that preliminary check first. Voting is open for 10 business days, so it's going to be open from 9 a.m. on Monday, the 2nd of September, which is next week, till 4 p.m. Friday, the 13th, which is the week after. So you've got 2 weeks to put it in. It doesn't have to go in during business hours because it's all online. You can do it at any time during that period, but just make sure that you put it in and you put it in on time. When it does come time to voting, all of the voting for the election is also online, and it's done through the USASA website. So students will be emailed a voting link saying that, well, I think that they'll be emailed saying that the election is open and they can now go vote. And then they'll be linked to the page. And then you have your individual logins on the USASA website. And then within that login, you get one vote. And by one vote, I mean one vote per position that you're able to vote for. So, City West students will only be able to vote for president, postgraduate, international student rep, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander student rep, and the 2 City West reps. So, those 4 positions that anyone can vote for, well, if they're contested, so if we have more than one person nominating for those positions and it goes to an election, they can be voted for by anyone. But then those campus-based ones can only be voted for by that campus. In that process, if people think that they're from the wrong campus, they can contact us to have it checked. So we get the electoral roll from the university, from Campus Central, based on everyone's enrollment. So that's where we can work out who's able to vote for which positions and who's able to run for which positions, based on their enrollment. So that is something that candidates can query with us if there are any issues, but we get all the information from the university, so we're very confident that it's very usually correct. The way that voting is counted, and this is also pretty important when it comes to, the actual result of the election, especially before, I talked about you can nominate for multiple positions and be elected to only one of them. So if you the matter of preferences is really important for when people vote. So you can get in on preferences, basically. So if someone gets elected to another position and they were elected to something else, their second preferences it'll get redistributed. Students can vote with preferences optionally with preferences. So you can vote for just one against someone's name. All right. So say there's 4 candidates and someone decides that they only want to vote for one person and not the others, then they can just go 1 and then submit their vote. If they want to vote for a first preference and a second preference, they go 1, then they go 2, then nothing, and so on until up to the full amount of candidates. If then that person who got the highest amount of votes, actually, I'll step back a second because we do quota voting with this election. So in order for a person to be elected, they need to reach a quota of votes received. This is kind of the way that the Australian Senate, counts their voting. So the preferences will keep being redistributed until someone receives a clear quota, and that quota will depend on the number of candidates and the number of people voting. So the quota will change depending on the position. We can't really predict that now. But so someone nominates for a position, 3 other people run for that position. The first preference votes, they don't have a clear quota. That person who got the 3rd highest, their votes get redistributed to first and second until a quota is reached, and so on. With some of the positions, we have seen multiple, usually for NUS delegates, we've seen multiple re-preferencing and stuff of the outcome. So it is kind of interesting. I don't know. I really like electoral systems. I think it's quite fascinating the differences that different electoral systems can make on voting systems. So I just wanted to make it clear to you guys how that gets counted, so you can kind of be clear on that and think about which positions that you're running for. So voting will open on Monday the 14th of October and it will close on Friday the 18th of October at 4 p.m. So because those are on our website and all done through electronically, that'll be 9 a.m. sharp and 4 p.m. sharp. So yeah, students can vote anytime within that 24-hour, within that period, 24 hours a day during that Monday to Friday, at a time that is convenient for them via the USASA website. So, another thing that's really important, sorry about that, for everyone to know as well is that there is compulsory candidate briefings. So one thing you'll notice that I haven't talked about is campaigning, and campaigning is kind of promoting yourself as a candidate and trying to get people to vote for you. We are going to talk more about campaigning at the compulsory candidate briefings. Now, this is another part of the election process that you must attend as a candidate. So from 6 till 7 on either Monday the 16th of September or Tuesday the 17th of September. So we do have this on the nomination form. We will say which one you're going to attend. It's really important that you do come along to one of these if you are nominating. It only goes for an hour, and you will hear more about campaigning, and it's also a requirement of the nomination process. So you will hear from Deb, who's the returning officer. She'll talk to you about the rules and the expectations around that, and it'll just make sure that everyone's on a level playing field, is on the same page, and can answer any of that nitty-gritty question stuff around campaigning and so on. Which is, once you get to that point, you will want to hear all that. It is going to recap some of the stuff that we've talked about today, but it is going to go more into depth around campaigning and the complaints and appeals process in the election as well. So yeah, just keep that in mind. You can see here I said, or by appointment at discretion of returning officer. So like if you absolutely cannot make either of these sessions, you can apply to the returning officer to have a different time or to work something out. That is at the discretion of the returning officer based on the information that you provide them. So it can't just be because you didn't feel like going or anything like that. You really do need to make time for that, and you will be aware of it at the time that you nominate. But yeah, there are 2 different sessions to choose from. So I know all of this seems like it's a lot of work and there's a lot involved and it's really serious. And it's kind of true, it is. Like that, it is quite a serious role. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of things, that you're looking after for the organization, as well as things that you'll learn and new experiences and new like information that you probably weren't aware of before. Someone said, do classes count as a good reason? That's a question for Deb. I can't predict how she'll make her decision. But yeah, you'll just have to apply to Deb at the time that you nominate. On the nomination form, we do have a thing where you say this session or this session, and then underneath say, I can't attend either. Please contact me about this. And then we will get in touch with you directly. So we do give you an opportunity to apply for that, criteria thing. Yeah, so I've talked about everything that's involved and all the stuff. And yeah, it is quite a serious role. There's a lot, but it's also fun, and there's a lot of things that you'll get out of it. It really is worth it to be involved in this. I actually think even the process of running in an election, even if you don't get elected, is still really worthwhile. Something that you'll definitely get a lot out of, because it's a really good opportunity for you to think about what am I interested in at UniSA? What do I have to offer for UniSA students? Like, why should people elect me? And then think about what you want to do with that. Like, I think that process of really looking inward and thinking about what you have to offer, being a student representative, is a really good reflective process. And then to go through that and putting yourself out of your comfort zone and putting yourself out there is something that's really good for your resilience, and it's character building. Like it actually is. Like, I know that sounds silly, but it is actually, yeah, you do get stuff out of even the election process itself. This is a bunch of different, things that we think you'll get out of being in the role. I'm not going to read into every single one of them. And I'm looking at it now and I'm like, well, that's quite, yellow on white. It's not that easy to read, but so I guess I'll point out a couple of them. So like resilience, confidence, public speaking and presenting, accounting and financial analysis. You're going to get a free education in financial accounting, basically, and how to understand and read balance sheets and financial reports. You're going to get a free education in, risk assessment and negotiation and influencing. You're going to have real opportunity to be a student leader and develop your skills in advocacy and influencing and negotiating. You're going to get to learn about policies, and you're going to get to practice your critical thinking and analysis. Like, these are experiences that you can't, like, it's priceless. And it's not just the training that you get from, the board retreat or through the other formal training that we provide. It's also the things that you learn from each other as board reps. Like, the kind of people who put their hands up to be on the board are people who are also really passionate about student representation, about decision making, about leadership. the things that you'll learn from other like-minded people like that, it's invaluable. The kind of experiences and skills that you'll get, it'll stay with you forever. And it will really shape the way that you think about the uni. It'll give you a way to contribute to the uni and also to USASA as well. So it really is worth it. It's personally rewarding. You're going to get ongoing support and training. So don't let the high level knowledge based stuff get in the way. You're going to get supported with that. You're going to get to learn to practice your own skills. You're going to get access to, leadership opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't. This will be good for your CV. And also you can get hours for UniSA Plus. So this is actually a new thing. We previously weren't able to sign off on USASA board work for UniSA Plus, but if you are doing the UniSA Plus award, you are now eligible to get any hours for training or things like that towards that as well. So just something to think about there as well. But yeah, it is quite, there's a lot. It's serious, but you'll get a lot out of it.